Hello, and welcome to Direct Initiative, the podcast where we talk about direct democracy and the importance of ballot measures. I'm Alex Kawa, and today we're going to be talking about Ohio, or more specifically, about a measure that will be on the ballot in Ohio this August. So to give a little bit of background, Ohio is one of the many states in this country that has an initiative process, as in citizens can petition a certain state statute or constitutional amendment onto the ballot to be voted on. But the Ohio Republicans, who overwhelmingly control state government, don't like that. They want to weaken that. Specifically, they want to raise the threshold to pass a constitutional amendment from a simple majority to 60%. Now, of course, the irony in all of this is that it would only take a simple majority to change the Constitution to raise the threshold to changing the Constitution. That sounds so messed up, doesn't it? And yeah, it is messed up, but what's even more messed up is the fact that this would only apply to citizen-initiated constitutional amendments and not legislatively referred ones like this one is, because it was the legislature that passed it. And so that's just, again, blatant power grab, and you might be thinking, oh, well, changing the Constitution should be hard, so maybe a 60% threshold is good. Well, Ohio has had this process in place for over a century, and nothing bad has happened. And this is not just my argument, this is the argument of a Republican Supreme Court justice in Ohio. But this isn't the first instance of a Republican-controlled state legislature trying to weaken the power of the initiative. Several Republican states have been doing this for years now, because, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, voters in red states have used the initiative process to pass nominally democratic laws, such as Medicaid expansion, raising the minimum wage, and marijuana legalization. According to a May 2021 New York Times report, quote, "These moves were all the product of ballot initiatives, a century-old fixture of American democracy that allows voters to bypass their legislatures to enact new laws, often with results that defy the desires of the state's elected representatives. While they have been a tool of both parties in the past, Democrats have been particularly successful in recent years at using ballot initiatives to advance their agenda in conservative states where they have few other avenues. But this year, Republican-led legislatures in Florida, Idaho, South Dakota, and other states have passed laws limiting the use of the practice, one piece of a broader GOP attempt to lock in political control for years to come, along with new laws to restrict voting access and the partisan redrawing of congressional districts that will take place in the coming months. So far in 2021, Republicans have introduced 144 bills to restrict the ballot initiative process in 32 states, according to the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, a liberal group that tracks and assists citizen-driven referendums. Of those bills, 19 have been signed into law by 9 Republican governors. In 3 states, Republican lawmakers have asked voters to approve ballot initiatives that in fact limit their own right to bring and pass future ballot initiatives. And just to give some examples, in Mississippi last week, the conservative state Supreme Court, ruling on a Republican lawsuit, invalidated the state's entire initiative process on a technicality, throwing out a 2020 referendum that legalized medical marijuana and halting an effort to collect signatures to place Medicaid expansion on the state's 2022 ballot. And in South Dakota, Republicans have in recent years limited the window for collecting petition signatures to the cold winter months and required all canvassers to register with the state and wear state-issued identification cards while gathering signatures, hurdles that the state's few Democrats say have increased the difficulty of qualifying for the ballot. And in South Dakota, in 2022, they put a measure on the ballot that would do the same thing as Ohio, as in raise the minimum threshold to pass a constitutional amendment, or a citizen-initiated constitutional amendment, to 60%. Thankfully, they overwhelmingly rejected it. And that does give me hope that Ohio will do the same thing, because South Dakota is an even redder state than Ohio, so if they rejected it, it's not a stretch to say that Ohio will as well. But make no mistake about it, this is not about preserving the importance of the Ohio Constitution, regardless of what you might hear from the talking heads and the politicians who support it. And no quote sums that up more than this quote from Secretary of State Frank LaRose, who is supporting the amendment. Quote, "This is 100% about keeping a radical pro-abortion amendment out of our Constitution. The left wants to jam it in there this coming November." Now, what he's referring to is the fact that Ohio voters are gathering signatures to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot this November that would codify the right to an abortion in their state constitution. This is important because Ohio has passed a 6-week abortion ban that is currently tied up in the courts. So giving it protection in the Constitution would essentially nullify that law for good and make Ohio safe for abortion access. And so this is what he's clearly stating. In no uncertain terms, he's saying he wants to suppress the will of the voters, who overwhelmingly support abortion access in Ohio. But perhaps what's even more infuriating is the rank hypocrisy from Secretary LaRose, because he says that this is meant to stop out-of-state interests from influencing Ohio elections, when this entire movement to raise the threshold is bankrolled by out-of-state interests. Most notably, an Illinois billionaire GOP megadonor named Richard Uihlein, who donated $1 million just a couple months ago to make sure that the Ohio legislature passed this amendment and sent it to the ballot. And this Uihlein guy, well, let's just say that it should be no surprise that he's bankrolling this. Quote, Uihlein's support for the amendment to preempt the ballot measures is being funneled through a new political action committee formed in March called Save Our Constitution PAC, which is running ads in support of the change. Uihlein, founder of the shipping company Uihlein, gave the PAC $1.1 million last month. One of the country's biggest conservative political donors, Uihlein was the primary funder of the group that organized the rally that preceded the January 6th attack on the Capitol. In the days after the attack, he and his wife gave more than $5 million to groups seeking to overturn the results of the presidential election. So make absolutely no mistake about it. Richard Uihlein hates American democracy. He tried to overturn it with regards to the 2020 election, and now he's trying to overturn direct democracy in Ohio, which is basically the only voice that the people of Ohio actually have. Because, let's be honest, politicians don't have your best interest in mind. And the initiative is a tool to go around their inaction and inefficiency and corruption. That's what's the whole point of why this initiative tool was even brought about to begin with. And it's why it's continued to be used today when politicians refuse to act on the issues that voters care about. So, while Uihlein failed to dismantle democracy during January 6th and the aftermath, he might succeed in dismantling it in Ohio if he gets his way. And finally, just the cherry on top of this all, the Republican legislature in Ohio banned August special elections a while ago. But now they're bringing it back just for this. And it's clear why. Because they want low turnout so it's more likely to pass. Let's not let them get their way. If you live in Ohio, go to the polls on August 8th and vote no on this. It's issue 1 on the ballot. Vote no. And if you're able to, then make sure you donate to the organization that's opposing this measure. I'll leave a link to it below if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you know anybody who lives in Ohio, tell them to vote no on this because this is vital. Do not let these anti-democratic extremists take away the one tool that you have in terms of public policy. Democracy in America is screwed as is. We do not need to screw it any further by letting these authoritarian extremists get their way by dismantling the will of the people. The initiative is a tool that should be expanded, not dismantled. And maybe Ohio can send a message that it's here to stay and the people's voice still matters. Well, thank you all very much for listening. As always, if you're listening to this on YouTube, I have links below to further reading regarding what I mentioned in here. And also, if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, then make sure you follow the podcast and leave a good review. And I will see everybody soon. I'm Alex Kawa, and this is Direct Initiative.